Hello, welcome to a video about HTML. In particular, what I'm looking to do in this video is provide a pretty simple overview of HTML for those of you who are either completely unfamiliar with it or just want to be reminded of what it is and what it does. So HTML stands for Hypertext Markup Language, nice fancy name. And what it is it's the language that we use to create web pages in their most fundamental sense. So it's what we use to express kind of the content of a web page and its basic structure as a document. And that word document is important in understanding HTML because that's really the premise of how web pages work in their most traditional form, is that they're thought of in HTML as a document that's sort of like got a start, and then sections and paragraphs of text and so on that sort of proceed vertically down a page to the bottom. So a linear presentation of formatted text is what HTML is for. You probably recognize HTML if you recognize it by the fact that it has all of these things called tags, which have got little angle brackets with some kind of a word inside it, like body or P or IMG, etc. And normally speaking, where we find HTML in files that have the extension .html, sometimes .htm, depending on some things that don't really matter. We'll always use .html. What we're really interested in this course is, of course, doing things with HTML via JavaScript. But in order to be able to do that, we need at least a basic understanding of how HTML itself works. And we need to be able to write enough simple HTML to manipulate with JavaScript. So that's really the objective here, okay? We're going to get up and running to be able to use JavaScript with a web page. First of all, we need a web page. So I'm just going to illustrate the key bits that we need to build up a document and point you towards the documentation that can help you find out more. So without further ado, let us actually begin with this. So I'm going to head over to my computer. This is my computer. I've got a little section called the web page, and I'm going to make a new folder. I'm going to call it HTML. And what I'm going to do is, this is going to be where my web page lives. So it's just another project like any other project, right? This is a folder that's going to hold all of the files for this project where I'm going to build a web page. So I've got a folder called HTML, and I'm just going to drag that onto Atom, or open it in Atom if it was open. I'm going to open Atom. And I'm just going to open it over here by dragging it. I'll drag it now. I guess I'll just drag it over here. There we go. So it's open in Atom, but the HTML folder is empty because I don't have anything in there. And so the very first thing that we need if we're going to have HTML on our web page is the file that contains the HTML. And normally speaking, this file is called index.html. Okay? Index.html is the special name of an HTML file that kind of gets run by default if somebody navigates to the folder that it's in. So that's a sort of, generally speaking, most of the time that's the name that you give to your file. So I've already got a new empty file here, right? So I'm just going to save this file in my HTML folder as index.html. So index.html saved into my HTML folder. This is called HTML because it's just the name of the project, right? That's not a special name. I could have called this anything. I should have called it HTML overview. But I didn't, and I'm not going to go back now. Maybe I could rename it now. Can I rename the root folder? No, I can't. We're just stuck with it. Just roll with it. This is what the folder is called. It's called HTML. So now I've got a website, technically. I've got a folder that contains my website. Inside it, I've got a file, index.html, that contains my web page written in HTML. And as you can see, the web page has nothing in it. So if I were to run this amazing website with Atom Live Server, here it is. Not much going on. And there's not much going on because this is an empty file. So there's nothing there. And there's nothing there either. However, we now have the connection, right? We've got a file that we're going to write HTML in, and we've got that file being represented by the browser very accurately right now as nothing. So what do we use to build up a web page? What I'm going to do is I'm just going to go through a few basic pieces of a web page until we've got an actual web page sitting up over there. And I'm just going to cover the things that I think are the most important, okay? You can always find out more through documentation. The first thing that you should always put in an HTML document is the doc type. Oops, and it's got an exclamation mark in front of it, so I'm already doing silly things. Should look like that. Doctype HTML, okay? So pointy bracket, exclamation mark, doctype all in capitals, and then HTML after that, and then a closing pointy bracket. This whole thing of enclosing things in pointy brackets is kind of the calling card of HTML in general, and it's true here. So this line is here to tell the browser what kind of stuff is in this file, so that at the very start of the file, the browser can read this and think, okay, well, it's HTML. You might think that it could just find that out from the extension of the file, .html, but that's not necessarily reliable. This is a way of promising in our file that we're going to deliver HTML content. So that's the first thing that we always put in. And obviously, this is not going to do anything over here. Our browser still doesn't have anything to display. The next thing that you always have is a pair of tags called the HTML tag. So HTML looks like this. Close HTML. So everything in our HTML document is going to go in here, in between these two things. And this is called an HTML tag. There's an opening tag. This is the first one. Then there's all the stuff inside, which is going to be our web page. And then there's the closing HTML tag. And this is a very, very common theme in writing HTML, is that we open a tag, put stuff inside it, and then close it. We always open it with pointy brackets with the name of the tag inside it. This tag is called HTML. And we always close it with pointy brackets with the same thing, except we put a / in front of the tag name, HTML. That's telling it we're closing this tag. Now, HTML is very hierarchical, so it's super important that we remember to do this. You always open and close your tags, except if there's a couple of exceptions. Okay, so this is where my web page goes. Another thing to know about HTML that's just helpful is that there's a special tag called a comment tag. Here is my web page. I'll close it there. A comment tag like this, it allows you to put things on your web page that just won't even be seen by the browser. They're purely there if you're looking at the HTML source code. It can just be a useful way of keeping track of what's going on. You can see it begins with a pointy bracket, like always, exclamation mark, and then 2 dashes. Then you write whatever you want to write, and then you close it with 2 dashes and the closing angle bracket. These can be multiple lines. They go on for as long as you want, right? Until you close it. Okay, so there's a comment. So my web page is going to go inside this HTML tag. So let us begin to put in some actual stuff. The first thing that we can put in that's actually going to be seen by the browser is going to go inside a thing called the head tag. So we always have a head tag. It looks like this. Same premise, right? We open it with the word head in pointy brackets. We close it with the word head with a / in front of it in pointy brackets. And the head of an HTML document is a tag that contains kind of the meta information about the document. These aren't things that are going to be rendered on the page itself. They are information about the page that the browser will use to do its job. And for right now, we are only going to put one thing in here, and that is the title of the web page. And to do that, as you might imagine, there is yet another tag, and that tag is called title. So we write title, and then in here we would put the title of the web page. I'm going to write generic text so I don't have to think. We close it again in the same way, right? Pointy bracket / title. So putting this tag inside the head, the meta information about our website, our web page, sorry, will set the title of the document to title of web page. If I save this and I pop over here and I reload, title of web page is here, right? So it's changed the title. This is going to affect things like clearly what displays at the top here in the tab bar. Also, if I bookmark this page, for example, this is the title that it will use. It's obviously very important to set the title of your web page because you look silly if your web page says title of web page up here instead of something appropriate. Okay, there's a lot of other stuff that we could put. And by the way, I made that into a comment just in the same way that we would in JavaScript. I hit Command /, Control /, I think, in Windows to turn it into a comment. There's lots more stuff that goes inside the head tag than just the title. Feel free to look at the documentation for that and just compare with other web pages, the kinds of things that you can put in here. The most important thing is the title. Let's just stick with that for right now. Okay, so that's the head. You can already see how hierarchical HTML is, right? We've already got kind of a hierarchy that goes several pieces deep. I can exaggerate it if I do this. So we've got the HTML tag, and in it is the head tag, and in it is the title tag, and in that is the actual title text, and then we close the title, and then we close the head, and then we close the HTML. So there's this very serious sense of a linear hierarchical structure. That's just the way that it works. It's good because it forces us to work in a specific way. Obviously, it can potentially be quite limiting. Hopefully, those limits lead us to feel like we can be extra creative. So we've taken care of the head, which is the stuff that the browser needs to know about our web page. Then there's the stuff that we want to actually appear on our web page, and that all goes inside a thing called the body tag. Body. I don't know why my tabbing is so crappy, but there it is. So the body tag is where all of the content of our web page will appear. Indeed, if I just start typing stuff, something very intelligent like then it will show up over here, right? There it is. My web page has something on it. However, we don't really tend to write our web pages as plain text inside the body tag. Instead, there are yet more tags that we use to actually structure the content of our page. So we're not going to do that. The most common tag that we use when we want to represent text in a web page is called the P tag. It's so common that they didn't call it the paragraph tag, which is what P stands for. They called it the P tag because they wanted some brevity, because it's so super common. So we write P just in the same way, right? And then close P. And in here, we would write our text, right? So here is a paragraph of text, and that will show up. There it is. You may not be able to notice, but it's actually slightly indented from where it was before. And I can add another one. P. Here is another. Oops. Here is another paragraph of text. Close that one as well. Okay. The good thing about paragraph, the P tag, is you can see it treats these things as separate paragraphs, right? It's already doing a little bit of formatting, to be honest. It's inserted this little gap in between these two lines of text and made them look like, two separate pieces of text that I'm including in my document. That's the P tag. We use it to include paragraphs of text. Another very common thing that we want to do is, if we're thinking about writing a document, it's have headings. And headings are, again, so common that they have very abbreviated tag names. The biggest heading that you can use is called an H1 tag. I'm going to write it inside the H1 without doing a new line this time. So this would be the main heading of my page. It would probably be a repetition even of the title of the web page. This is the big thing that the entire page is all about. So if we go back and take a look at that, there it is there. Again, this is the default formatting that you get with a browser when you offer it no information on how to visually style the text. This is what you get. You get like a sans serif font, specific font sizes. This gets bolded, it's bigger, etc. So the main heading is an H1 tag. So you write H1 in angle brackets and close H1 in angle brackets with the /. And then I'm going to guess you can work this out, but you can do smaller headings by using different numbers. H2 is a subheading. So we can write an H2 tag and close it and have that in front of this paragraph. And then if we want to, we can start adding some actual meaning to the structure of this page, right? So I can add another H2, and that could be my second subheading. So now we've got structure. Let's go look at it. So now we've got the main heading. That tells me what the whole page is about. We've got a subheading. You can see it's still a heading. It's still bold, but it's a bit smaller than the main heading. And then inside, in some sense, that subheading is this paragraph of text. So this is associated as a unit. And then we've got the same thing with the second subheading. This is associated as a unit. But then also, this whole thing is a unit, right? A big overall heading and the full contents of the page. So this idea of hierarchy is really coming into play here. So we've already got like the ability to write a thesis now, right? We could write a thesis or a book with just H tags and P tags. There are more sizes of heading. So H2 is a subheading, H3 is a sub-subheading, H4 is a sub-sub-subheading, all the way to H6, which is the smallest one that is built into HTML. So we can structure a document pretty nicely with just a handful of these tags, right? Headers and paragraphs right now. It's not an interesting page, but it is a structured page. So what else might we want to do? Another classic thing that we want to do is emphasize specific pieces of text. We can do that with a couple of key tags. One is to allow us to emphasize some text. So this is, so how do we emphasize? There's a tag called the EM tag, EM for emphasis. Emphasized, he tries to spell that correctly. So that's emphasized because the word emphasized is inside an EM tag. It's got an opening EM tag and a closing EM tag. And so if we go look at the web page, it's in italics. That's the default for emphasizing some text. If we want to have a different kind of emphasis, there's another tag called strong. This is, and what the specification generally says is that it means it's important. So I'm going to write that word because this is strong, seems kind of dumb. This is important is inside a strong tag. Again, same HTML world. You have a tag that says strong and then a closing tag that says strong. And if we go and look at the page rendering, it's in bold. So those are the defaults, right? EM or an M tag is italics and a strong tag is in bold. We can use these again to add yet more hierarchy, right? In the end, an emphasized or bolded text is another hierarchical distinction in the shape of a document. So this lets us create a pretty decent document full of text. We can do a lot with what we've got. And indeed, once we plug JavaScript into this, we can do a lot with what we have here. We can really play around with this already. But one thing that is really completely central to using HTML in a way that makes sense is that the most important thing about HTML is that it's a hypertext. And the hyper bit of the hypertext is about links. It's about documents that are linked to one another so that you can navigate between documents in the special way that is what created the web, right? The World Wide Web is all about hypertexts. So we want to be able to include links, and therefore we are going to include links. And the way that we include links is with yet another tag. I'm going to have another paragraph here to put this tag in. This tag is also super common in terms of writing it, so it has a very abbreviated name too, which is it is an A tag. So here is a, now I want to write, here is a link to a, I'm going to say giant peach. Now I would like link to a giant peach to be an actual link to another website. So what do? I need to surround it in a tag. Hardly surprising. And what I need to do is I need to surround it in an A tag, like that. Okay? So an A tag is what we use to link to things. I believe A stands for anchor, which doesn't necessarily make the most sense in the known universe. If we go and look at our web page, it doesn't really do anything. That didn't really seem to have an effect. And the reason for that is that we haven't got a really important piece of information without which a link can't really work, right? And what is that? That is the question of where it links to. So generally speaking, there are two ways, two kinds of links. One is that you will link to some other website somewhere else, in which case you will put in the full URL of that website, or you might link to another HTML page somewhere else on your website, or some other kind of file, in which case you might provide a relative path. So let's just link to an actual website. So the way that we do this is there's no extra tag that we would use to specify where this goes to, this link that we want to create. What we use is this other extra important part of HTML tags, which is attributes. So it turns out that inside this opening tag, in this case it's an A tag, we can add extra information that will help the HTML tag do its job. So we can tell it where this link goes to with an attribute called the href, which I assume is something like hypertext reference or hyperreference. So href is the piece of information I want to give it, which is the address to go to. And we always write the name of the attribute like this, not in quote marks or anything like that, just href in this case, an equal sign, which is kind of like assignment in programming, and then the information in quotation marks. It's very traditional to use double quotation marks in HTML. And in here, we type the address that this link should be linking to. So I'm going to link to https://thi.cc. So now we've made a meaningful link, right? It's still an A tag, like still the nature of the tag is that we open the pointy bracket and the name of the tag is A, and we still close the A right here. But it's got an extra piece of information about how it should behave, which is where it links to. And that is using an attribute called Href that we set to the address of the website it links to. And this link is going to have the text that's inside the A tag. So here it is here, right? Here is a link to a giant peach. So all of the text that was inside the A tag is the link. So I can click on this and open it. And if I head over, I get to a giant peach. Make of that what you will, and think about that as you wish. So that's how we do links, okay? It's important because it's important to make links. It's really important to know about these attributes. There's many tags use attributes, and we'll see another one in a moment. It's always important to look up the documentation for tags if you want to know what attributes are available for them. I think it's true that almost every tag can have some kind of an attribute. I think that's almost certainly true. Okay, so we've got a link. What else might we want? We probably want to display an image. Okay, so we want to display an image. If I want to do that, I'm going to need an image. I'm realizing I didn't provide an image, but maybe, what's the best way? What's the best thing for me to do here? It's most likely if I'm displaying an image that it's just going to be inside my, my folder here. So I'm going to make a new folder, and I'm going to call it images. And I need an image here. What am I going to do? How am I going to do this? I am going to go back to here, and I'm going to go steal an image from any of my templatey stuff from other things I've got. I always know that there's a clown, right? So I'm going to grab an image. I'm going to grab the clown image, and I'm going to put it into my images folder. That's just, that's just files, my friend. I moved, or I copied in this case, a file called clown.png into the images folder of my HTML website. Having done that, I'm now in a place to include that image on my web page. How am I going to do it? I'm going to do it with a tag. There is yet another tag, and I'm going to put this tag at the bottom of my page here after that paragraph. And this tag is called image. It's actually called image with just spelled IMG. So it's like this. And the weird thing, maybe it's not weird, about an image tag is it has no closing tag. So we don't write image open and image close. And that's probably because there's sort of nothing to put in here, right? There's no text that you put inside an image in an obvious sense. You could imagine something, but the way that HTML works is that doesn't make sense. And so an image tag is one of the tags that has no closing tag. It's just the tag like this. And what does that mean? That means that we're going to give it all of the information it needs to display an image in attributes. So the main attribute that we use with an image is called source, but it's written just src because we believe in extreme abbreviation of literally everything apparently. And src specifies where the image is, the source of the image. So again, always in quotation marks is the information. So we write the name of the attribute, src, an equal sign, like assignment in programming, and then quotation marks, where is it? And where is it? This time the file is on my computer. It's in the images folder. So I say images. And then it's in there, and the name of the file is clown.png. So I write a relative path like this. Images/clown.png tells the browser this is where the image is that you should display at this location in the document. This would be enough, but technically speaking, you should also always include one more attribute, which is the alt attribute, ALT. And what that stands for is that you're going to provide an alternative text in case this image cannot be seen by the user. Perhaps it can't be loaded. That's possible as well. This enables people with accessibility difficulties who might be using a screen reader, for example, and therefore cannot see the image. It will read out the text that you associate in this alt attribute. So I'll just say this is maybe a large clown emoji. So that will help somebody who can't see the image to know what the image is of. and that completes my image tag, right? So let's just make sure that that worked. So it's at the very bottom. He tabbed to the wrong place, and there it is. There's the big hopeful clown emoji that I love so much, just stuck into the document. So we're really cooking now, right? Like we've got a proper, we could write an amazing textbook or something with images and text. So again, the image tag, one key thing about it is that it has no closing tag. It's just the image tag, the opening tag. So we use attributes to specify the information, and it's src for where the image is, and alt for the alternate text that would be presented if somebody cannot see the image for some reason. I believe actually by default, am I wrong about this? I'm wrong about this. I was going to say it might be the mouse over value, but it's not. That's okay. So that's an image. That's an image tag. You can also use a URL here. So you could point to some other image if you wanted to, using HTTP or HTTPS. As I said, though, it's sort of common if you're including an image on your page that the image would be part of your own local server. A thing that is sort of maybe clear that you might want to do is you might want to link to something with an image, right? You might want it to be the case that I can click on this clown and it will take me somewhere. And this is where HTML kind of makes sense. If I want this to be the thing that you click, and I compare that to how the A tag worked up here, where the text was in here is what you click, I can put this image inside an A tag, and then that will be the thing that is the link, right? The thing that is the visual representation of the link. So I can create an A tag around my image and specify where that would go. In this case, let me just, I'll just link to the same beautiful peach. So now we've got an A tag, and maybe this will look nicer if I do some indenting. So an A tag is around the contents. The thing that's going to be the link is an image, and it's going to link to the same thing, to thick. We don't see a change here, except that when I mouse over the clown image now, you can see my cursor turns into a hand, and at the bottom left there, if you can read it, it's very small. It tells me the address that would take me to. And if I click on it, then I get back to the old thick site that we know and love. So that's just a classic thing that we might want to do, right? That's a lot already. We can really make relatively sophisticated web pages content-wise this way. We can include very expressive content, right? Because text is super expressive and images are super expressive, and we can pop them all in without trouble. However, there's a little bit more that we should know about before we consider ourselves somewhat masters of our domain. And that is sort of a more general idea, which is around how do you kind of structure these web pages. And so a really common thing that you'll see when you look at other people's HTML and other examples, tutorials, etc., is that you often want to be able to kind of group parts of your HTML together. And this kind of makes sense semantically, right? We already sort of were saying that's what we're doing here, for example, right? That this is like a specific section of my web page has got this heading and then this text in it. And then this is also kind of a specific section of my web page that's got a heading, a couple of paragraphs, and an image. Like those could be blog posts or something if this was an antiquated blog that nobody looks at anymore. And so the most generic way that I could group these things together is to use this thing called a div tag, div. So again, it's the same principle. We put the div tag, oh sorry, let me do it for the first heading first. So we write div at the beginning, then we encapsulate all the stuff that's part of this thing called a div, which stands for division, or it's a dividing this page up into semantic units. So all of the stuff that's in this particular div, I'm just going to indent it nicely. I wish that would happen automatically. I'm not sure why it didn't. All of this stuff here now is inside a div, and therefore it's kind of grouped in the sense of how HTML works, and later we will see how CSS works for visual styling. This is particularly useful because we can style individual elements in here, or we can style the entire div at once because of this hierarchical idea. And we would probably also therefore want to make this thing a div as well. All of this stuff in here, we'll say, is another div. I'm just going to indent it manually. So div allows us to break our page up into sections or pieces that we might want to think about as semantically distinct from each other, and as things that we might actually use either with JavaScript or with CSS to target specific components of our web page rather than just individual tags. okay? But it's purely structural. If we go back and look at our web page, there's no difference here. Those divs didn't actually do anything to the web page. They are just there under the hood, giving it a bit more structure that we can use as web developers for our own purposes. Now, that's Div. Div is really common. It's very, very popular. It's generic. It works. A lot of people are just happy using Div. However, HTML5 introduced what they feel, and I think I mostly agree, new tags to kind of replace Div. The idea was that Div is kind of too generic to the point where it doesn't really mean anything. It's like, well, what kind of thing is this? The div doesn't tell you, right? It's just like, well, this is some kind of division of stuff on this web page. And then this is another kind of division of stuff on the web page. And so HTML5 introduced new tags that basically function in the same way as div, but that give a sort of slightly more descriptive names to these. And so one of those that I think we would use here, for example, and let me replace all of these at once because I'm a cool guy, using my command double click to select all of those. One of those is called section. So I'm going to call each of these things a section. Just the word section, right? So again, it's still just the same thing. It's just a tag that you open, you put your section stuff in it, and then you close it. But now it's a little bit more meaningful, only a little bit, but a little bit more meaningful to say that each one of these is a section of my web page. It just adds a little bit of semantics on top of things. That's nice. There are other HTML5 new tags that we can use to kind of build up the semantics of our page. One of those is called header, which I would probably put around this main heading up here. So I'll just open and close that one up there. There's another one called nav, N-A-V, which, I mean, I don't have that here, but you could imagine if this web page had some kind of structural navigation to different pages, it would go in here. Navigation links, let's say, go in here. So nav is one that's meant to contain that kind of information. Header is meant to contain the information at the very top of the page in terms of the header of the page. I mean, I don't know how many different ways I can say that. And another classic one that you might find yourself wanting to use is the one called footer, which is kind of the opposite of header, right? Where you would contain stuff that's meant to be down at the bottom. Perhaps something like contact me if you feel like it. But I'm not telling you my email address. Contact information, useless contact information in this case, at the bottom of the web page, that would be in the footer. And again, a lot of this is looking forward, not just to making this more readable as code, but to styling it with CSS and doing interesting things with it with JavaScript. So again, even though we've made this even more, I think, easily understandable, it looks exactly the same on the web page. We haven't done anything that changes the way that it works. Obviously, I guess I added this this contact information here, so that's showing up as well. But we haven't really altered the visuals of the page. It's all about how it's structured underneath. And in HTML, caring about structure is a very real thing. So we do care about structure. That's enough to get started with what HTML is and does. It's not significantly more complicated than this. We can add layers of complexity, especially with things like CSS and JavaScript, and we will look at those things. But in terms of raw HTML, we are basically there in terms of what we need to know. The only other thing that we need to know that is important is what are the other elements that we might use, right? So I've got a few things that I've told you about, but we should probably, if we want to really, really know things, we can go and look at documentation. I recommend using the Mozilla documentation. And just to give you a little sense here, here is lots and lots of elements, right? So there's the head tag that we actually saw. There's a link tag, a meta tag, style tag, title tag. We used the title tag, right? So these are all kind of document metadata tags it's saying here. There's a sectioning root. This is the body tag that identifies the content. We saw that as well. Then there's these other things that we saw. Look, there's an address tag in case you want to put an address in it. That's useful. We've seen a few of these, right? Footer, header, h1, etc. But there's lots more. There's lots of tags that we haven't looked at. And looking through this list and just kind of getting a rough sense of what there is not the worst idea. Just to kind of build up an understanding of what's available. There's like stuff in here that as I scroll through this, I'm like, oh, that's interesting. I didn't know about that. There's an audio element, a video element. Those are cool. Embedding things back when we used to embed Flash on pages, SVGs. There's a lot of stuff, okay? reading that documentation and getting a little bit familiar with HTML that way is a great idea. And Mozilla, just beyond this actual element reference, has a great amount of documentation about HTML in general, how it works, a tutorial, all of those sorts of things. So if you're feeling at all wobbly and you want to know more, follow the documentation path. But what we've looked at here on this webpage, you don't really need to know significantly more than this to be successful in terms of applying a bit of CSS if you want, but most importantly, manipulating things using JavaScript, which is where we're trying to get, right? This is already a web page that we can manipulate and do interesting things with JavaScript, and that's where we'll be heading. So that's it. That's my little take on HTML and how it works and what it does and what it looks like and how you can get going with it. So go forth and HTML, and I will see you, as always, in the next video. Bye-bye.